Back in 1928, in the tiny, quiet town of Earling, Iowa, a 46-year-old woman became the focus of one of the most intensely documented cases of alleged demonic possession in American history. Now, this isn't just a horror story. It's a really complex historical event, and it's surrounded by controversy. So today, we're going to push past all the Hollywood stuff, separate the fact from the folklore, and really dig into the evidence behind this incredible case. First, we'll start with the woman at the very center of it all. Then we'll walk through the absolutely grueling 23-day ritual she endured. After that, we're going to uncover two very different, conflicting accounts of what really happened. We'll explore that central debate. Was it supernatural or was it psychological? And finally, we'll look at how a case that's almost a century old still has an impact today. So who was this woman? You might know her from popular stories as Anna Eklund, but her real name was probably Emma Schmidt. And to really get what happened in that Iowa convent, you first have to understand the life of suffering she lived long before she ever got there. You know, almost the entire historical record of this case, pretty much everything we know, rests heavily on the shoulders of one man, the local pastor, Father Joseph Steiger. He was the official eyewitness, the designated note-taker, and his incredibly detailed accounts of things that seem to defy any rational explanation are what cemented the Earling case in history. And right from the start, even her identity is a bit of a puzzle. See, popular accounts call her Emma Schmidt from Milwaukee, but actual historical research points to a different story. Hulda Emma Schmidt, born in Switzerland to a father named Jacob. And that name, Jacob, is a really crucial detail because it lines up exactly with what the priests involved in the case would later report. The story goes that her torment started when she was just 14. And according to the clerical accounts, it was all rooted in some absolutely profound family trauma. Her own father, Jacob, allegedly cursed her after she refused his incestuous advances. And if that wasn't enough, her Aunt Mina, who was also her father's lover and apparently a reputed witch, was said to have put spells on her food. This horrifying mix of abuse and alleged occult practices is what's presented as the gateway to decades of suffering. So, in 1928, after a previous exorcism years earlier only gave her temporary relief, Emma was secretly put on a train and taken to a Franciscan convent in Earling, Iowa. The idea was to do this far away from any public attention, a final, all-out attempt to free her from whatever was afflicting her. The priest in charge was Father Theophilus Riesinger, a Capuchin friar who was known for his expertise in this area. Now, it's really important to understand, he wasn't just winging it. He had official permission from the bishop, and he was following the Rituale Romanum. That's the church's formal, by-the-book procedure for exorcism. This wasn't improvisation. It was a highly structured official rite. And this ritual, it wasn't a single event, not even close. It was a grueling 4-month spiritual siege that was broken up into 3 incredibly intense sessions. With each new phase, the reported phenomena just escalated, testing the absolute limits of everyone there, from Father Riesinger to the nuns who had to physically restrain Emma. So what did people actually claim to see? Well, the eyewitness accounts documented some truly extraordinary stuff. They reported Emma levitating and clinging to the top of a door frame. They said her face and body would swell up to grotesque proportions. She was said to have spoken languages she'd never learned, and even revealed the hidden personal sins of priests in the room, details there's just no way she could have known. During the rite, Father Riesinger identified several different entities that were allegedly speaking through Emma. And these weren't just vague, abstract demons. They were specific, named figures, including Beelzebub, Judas Iscariot, and, maybe most disturbingly, the spirits of her own abusive father and aunt. When you hear about the sheer extremity of all these events, you have to ask, how do we know any of this? The Earling case is famous for being one of the most thoroughly documented of its time, but if you look closer at those documents, you start to see that the story we think we know might not be the whole truth. The official story, the one that got published, became a sensation. But hiding right behind it is a much more complicated and much more hidden version of what happened. And the key to understanding this whole discrepancy is the man who wrote it all down. Remember Father Joseph Steiger? He wasn't just a witness, he was the designated stenographer, the chronicler. His meticulous, detailed notes became the single source from which every other account, both public and private, was built. Our entire understanding of this case flows directly from his pen. And this is where the official story was carefully shaped.
The famous public account is a 1935 pamphlet called Begone Satan. It got the church's official seal of approval, and it tells this story of a clear, triumphant victory back in 1928. But a year before that, a Jesuit priest wrote a manuscript based on the very same notes from Father Steiger, and this version, it was suppressed, never officially published. And when you compare them, you see why. The suppressed version claimed the possession continued for years, only ending in 1934. It also included bizarre details like heavenly visitors and apocalyptic prophecies, things that made the case a lot messier, and way less of the clean, decisive victory the church wanted to show the world.
So ultimately, these conflicting accounts force us right back to the core question that has defined this case for nearly a century. Was Emma Schmidt possessed by demons, or was she the victim of a severe, deeply misunderstood mental illness? You really have two starkly different ways of looking at this. The supernatural interpretation argues that what happened in that convent just cannot be explained by science as we know it. Meanwhile, the psychological interpretation says that every single symptom can be understood as a manifestation of profound trauma and known psychiatric conditions. So the argument for a preternatural event, meaning something beyond the normal course of nature, it really rests on these phenomena that seem to violate physical laws. You've got xenoglossia, the ability to speak languages she'd never learned. There's levitation, which multiple clergy and nuns swore they saw. Hierognosis, or knowing hidden things, like the sins of the priests. And of course, the extreme physical changes reported throughout the ritual. But on the other hand, the case for psychopathology is also really compelling, especially when you remember her documented history of horrific abuse. Her symptoms line up with several modern diagnoses. Dissociative identity disorder could explain the distinct alters of Jacob and Mina. Schizophrenia could account for the voices. And something like conversion disorder could explain how deep psychological pain manifested as those extreme physical reactions like the swelling and vomiting. So why does a case from a tiny town in Iowa in 1928 still matter so much? Well, because its impact on American culture and even on the institutions that were involved has been absolutely immense. The details that came out of that pamphlet, Begone Satan, the projectile vomiting, the levitation, speaking in tongues, it basically created a blueprint for the modern exorcism story. When William Peter Blatty was researching his novel The Exorcist, the Earling case was a major source of inspiration, directly shaping the story that would define demonic possession for generations to come. And it's fascinating to think about this in a modern context, because so much has changed. If this happened today, the response would be completely different. Psychiatry would almost certainly focus on trauma-based therapy. The Catholic Church itself, with its modern rules, would demand a thorough psychiatric evaluation to rule out mental illness before even thinking about an exorcism. And of course, the 24/7 media world we live in would make the kind of secrecy they had in that convent totally impossible. And so, we're left with this profound question mark. If Emma Schmidt's torment was the result of a mind shattered by trauma, was that 23-day ritual a painful, tragic misdiagnosis of her suffering? But if it was supernatural, if those witnesses really saw what they said they saw, then what does that tell us about the forces that might exist just beyond our understanding? The case doesn't give us any easy answers, just a haunting look at the blurry lines between faith, trauma, and reality itself.